with nonprofits as small as 3 staff to nonprofits that are enterprise and have thousands of employees. And so I've been in this space for a little over 7 years. I love what Salesforce can do with the nonprofit missions that we work with, and I know that this is their general user group. So I'm going to be covering a feature of the NPSP. NPSP stands for the Nonprofit Success Pack. I'll jump to that in a second. So a Nonprofit Success Pack is a managed package. If you don't know what that is, you probably do, which is a set of configurable apps and features and functionality explicitly designed for the nonprofit use case. And it brings in a lot of adjustments to your standard Salesforce instance, things that relate to constituent engagement, revenue tracking, donation management, affiliate, participation engagement. So there's a whole feature set. It's a very robust application. It's been around since, I believe, 2011 and has matured significantly. And customizable rollups are a special nonprofit only version of the standard rollup functionality that you can find in any object in Salesforce. And so I'm going to go over that shortly. But I do want to just set the stage here for the audience. The functionality I am going to go over is only available to the Nonprofit Success Pack. It requires that package installed in your instance. Before I get started, does anyone have any clarifying questions on that? Silence is yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the reason I presented this, I should also add that I am the leader of the Parsippany nonprofit user group here in New Jersey as well. We haven't had as many meetings recently, but hoping to get some more up and running this year. So what are we talking about? So there's standard rollups. Then the NPSP in its early years had these different types of rollups that are basically now deprecated. They didn't provide the full feature set that larger nonprofits required. Number two, didn't scale very effectively with larger nonprofits. Some nonprofits are tiny, but some nonprofits are quite sizable and will hit large data volumes. And so 3 years ago, the Salesforce.org, which is now part of Salesforce.com, created what I would call what they call a new rollup engine. So rather than trying to update these legacy rollup feature set, they completely re-architected how the package rolls up data from some of these custom and standard objects in the NPSP. Before I do that, and I will give the presentation to you after this call. These are some links to just go dive in if you really want to get technical. And I know, Mike's here. He's on the technical side as well. I have linked here the technical deep dive. The team that did this were like superheroes. I love this stuff. How they built that roll-up engine. I've had people on the corporate side look at people from, I'll put it this way. There are people within Salesforce who talked about the customizable roll-up engine and are like a little jealous because it's not currently available on the standard Salesforce side. It was a nice piece of work from the technical team there. And I've linked to a nice YouTube video if you do want to learn more about how it was made. That is for people who are technically familiar. And then some other high-level resources. Oh, well, there you go. I added an extra. I guess this is just where I am today, but basically what I'm covering here is a little view about what rollups are, why we use them in the nonprofit use case, some considerations, some simple use cases, and then an advanced use case, which I forgot to update. So no worries about that, but I'm not going to be doing a walkthrough today. The reason is the links that I've put in this slide deck, link to YouTube videos that will walk you through. There are recipes now. Recipes are basically set up versions of this rollup functionality. that did not exist previously. And I don't want to take the time from that. Those resources are there, they're free, they're available. And I didn't want to duplicate them. So when you're a nonprofit and you look at this feature set, this customizable role of what problem are you trying to solve, right? And we've worked with nonprofit clients, and I've been on the nonprofit side, and I can tell you that the purpose of a roll-up is to take aggregate data and surface it on a parent object. And because customizable rollups are a re-architected feature set, what used to take a developer or separate third-party applications or flow can now be done using this point-click interface. It's really quite easy, and you'll have to create some extra fields, but want to surface these key questions, particularly from the standpoint of a nonprofit who may not have the type of governance that is in place in larger organizations. Who is using this data? What are they using it for? Which reports and dashboards are consuming it? Who's creating reports, right? When you create a new roll-up summary, you're taking aggregate data, putting it on the parent object. Is that going to change the reports that need to be run, right? I used to run an opportunities report grouped by account to get total opportunities within a time frame. But if I'm using a customizable roll-up, then I can just run an account report, right? So there's an administrative overhead you want to keep an eye on. The last thing we want to see is a nonprofit build a bunch of extra functionality and fields, and then no one uses them, or they're confused about them, or the report types need to be adjusted. So there's lots of impacts here that we do recommend. Do you need a new roll-up, or can you just use a report formula, right? There's lots of different things here that we recommend looking into. I'm not going to spend too much more time on that, but I have to do it almost like a public service announcement. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Other things that you can keep in mind. So again, this is very low level here, but roll-ups serve a few different purposes, right? Number one, they summarize the key information on the detail pages. On the master detail relationship, this is the standard. They improve reporting, and you need fewer report types or formulas. There's also really nice licensing benefits to summary formulas. Like if you have, there are instances within Salesforce Community Cloud or certain types of users where you can get a cheaper license and surface aggregate data on objects that you can display or show to those users, but they don't need access to the full standard Salesforce license. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis, but that's one of the benefits that I don't always see talked about, and I like to add because we always want to take advantage of the most cost-effective way to get that data to the right user. So that's the standard roll-ups, and they require a master detail relationship between the parent object and the child object, or master detail. Then there's these legacy rollups. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's been a few years since the NPSP does this, but there's still, before I even touch on this slide, in the chat, is anyone working for or have they worked with a nonprofit? I probably should have asked that before I started. Could help me.
Yeah, I've worked for a nonprofit in the past and used this instance of Salesforce.
Cool. All right. So a few folks. Nice, Fred. Accidental, totally. All right, great. So then I just want to make sure the audience is a little bit familiar. That's so helpful. So legacy rollups are going to be in any org that was created before 2019, May. So legacy rollups have the same basic functionality. The NPSP brings 87 fields that are rolling up data. And if you do have an instance that was created before May 2019, you will have to turn on this new customizable rollup feature. The UDR text you see here is basically what prompted them to go to customizable rollups, because the UDR could only roll up custom fields, couldn't roll up standard fields. It was limited to post-1 donations. You couldn't do any other stages. You could extend it with formula fields, but it was only from the opportunity. You had new objects that were introduced with NPSP after the UDRs, the user-defined rollups, were created, that this feature set didn't address. The data model had changed. It's more complex. And so they needed to improve the complexity and scalability of the tool. So what do customizable rollups do? Number one, you have to have the NPSP. The second thing is you must have the household account model. If you don't know what that is at a very high level, it's the structure of how accounts and contacts are structured in a nonprofit instance. So your standard Salesforce structure will have just contacts connected to their parent account. In previous legacy versions of the NPSP, they had actually created like a household object, a custom object called household, and did a funky thing with similar to person accounts, which are bad. So you do have to have the NPSP to use customizable rollups, and you do have to have what's called the household account model, which is a contact must be connected to an account, but that account will be their household. And a household is defined as a group of individuals who live at the same address. So with this new change, they introduced payments, which is, I think of payments like installments. So if you have an opportunity for a nonprofit, let's say they get a $5,000 grant, they're going to pay $1,000 a year over 5 years. You would have to have you might have 5 opportunities, but from a nonprofit standpoint, from a revenue, they want to book that 5,000 revenue as a single entity. And so payments were introduced to provide the installment, that sublayer. Soft credits, partial soft credits, those are only going to really be familiar to those who are in the nonprofit space. A soft credit is if my business gives the nonprofit some money. It didn't come from my bank account, but I was kind of responsible for bringing that money in for the nonprofit. A simpler way that you might hear this called is the give or get. In the nonprofit space, the give is what I donate to you, comes from my checking account. The get is what I influenced. And nonprofits want to track that influence. Partial soft credits, it's a very, very specific use case, but you can dive into there as well. Ultimately, the customizable rollups allows you to take payments, soft credits and partial soft credits. These are 3 separate objects, and roll them up to the account, contact, recurring donation, and general accounting unit. Those 2 here are unique to the nonprofit success pack. Just a note here, the customizable rollups do not surface information on the campaign object, nor do they surface them on the opportunity object. And they're, depending on your use case, you can probably use standard rollups or other aspects of Salesforce to get information from related records to the opportunity or campaign. The customizable rollups are structured to take information from these 3 objects. These 4 objects: opportunities, payments, soft credits, partial soft credits, and bring them up to the account, contact, and these 2 custom objects. It adds some new functionality. So a rollup performs an operation, right? A rollup takes the data and the records, looks at a field, and provides some calculation, and then surfaces that result on the parent object. And there are new things that you couldn't do in the previous version. There's something called donor streak, consecutive years of giving, gifts filtered by the first date, last date, first gift amount, last gift amount, from a donor's fundraising team's perspective, right? I might want to see that not just the date of the first gift, but the date of the amount of the first gift, and you can run reports off of that. That wasn't possible. The thing that was also interesting is a customizable rollup also can provide a lookup to related information on that gift. So I don't want to roll up the total sum. I want to pull the primary campaign source from the first gift. It's a highly specific use case, something that was never really possible before. But the customizable rollup engine can do aggregate summaries or single information summaries, like pull me the campaign source from that first gift, or pull me the campaign source from the most recent gift. And there's just so many other use cases. Some things to keep in mind about customizable rollups: they do obey fiscal year settings, and you do have to toggle them in the customizable rollup screen. The nice part about the customizable rollups relative to the legacy, so if you're working with a nonprofit, you see that they have an NPSP, an old version, and you see they're on legacy rollups, and they say, well, we had to build all these extra fields because the legacy rollups didn't let us change them. If you configure for customizable rollups, you can then edit all the previous ones, all 87. There's no practical limit. You can add a lot of add the rollups to your heart's content, as long as you don't run into other issues, obviously, with the data volume. But unlike standard objects, you're not limited to the number of rollups. You can also do custom filters. And the nice thing from an admin's perspective is the customizable rollups are metadata, custom metadata types, which means you can move them from your sandbox to your production as desired. This last part at the bottom, I don't know how deep everyone's in this. The partial soft credit, this little asterisk down here, the partial soft credit serves a function to say if like, let's say a bank sends a matching gift and two of your donors both work there, they'll send you a check for both of their matches. So you'll get a check for, let's say, $200. $100 goes to Jim, $100 goes to Mary. They both need to have a soft credit to say they brought in that money. Partial soft credits provide that capacity to track and report off of that. Though when the NPSP created it, it was because they couldn't adjust the opportunity contact role object. This is pretty technical. I'm not going to dive in too much more. And it's also pretty specific to the nonprofit use case almost exclusively, but just there's a little bit of a rabbit hole down there if you're interested. The last thing that I'm going to do before I provide some of the use cases is on the when you switch over. So let's say you're working with a nonprofit client and they have the legacy rollups and you want to turn on this new feature, there's a change in how these things are handled. And they didn't have this documentation for almost 2 years. So I'm finally happy that they have it. If you wanted to enable soft credits, previously you had to go to settings, donations, contact roles. This is now removed. You have to go to the customizable rollups. So the click path for each of these is very different. And so this is very helpful for new admins to NPSP who are working with the customizable rollups in the sandbox so that you can orient yourself to the features. And you can kind of see how, all this has been moved to these different section. So by the way, this screenshot is in the documentation. So I did steal it and showing it here. And there's an entire article about, like, before you enable customizable rollups, make sure you look at X, Y, and Z, do this in a sandbox, just like, public service announcement, making a big change to key data, you're always going to want to test it in your sandbox. So this was basically a list of some of the key fields that are rollups that come out of the box, excuse me. If I go over here, let me go ahead and draw. You'll see some of these membership ones. I'm not going to get into that right now, but you may have a lot of nonprofits that, whether they're arts organizations or membership organizations may use memberships. The NPSP does have a way of tracking membership revenue. One of the things that was noticing that you had here was there was a lot of missing. There was the rollups for the contacts weren't there. And so just a note on some of the change that is there now. But I'm gonna, oh, there you go. The first gift date. This was noting that first gift amount actually. The customizable rollups fit this solve for this use. These were the pre-existing rollups, and you had the date of the first gift. But if you wanted the first gift amount, it actually required either code or flow, and that was one of the bigger ones that we noticed. People want to know where people entered their gift, and then would then look at their engagement based off of that first gift. All right. So quick highlight of what they are. I can log in, but there's two components to a customizable rollup: the filter group, and then the rollups using that filter. So a filter group is a set of records. here they've called it ops opportunities 1, closed stage, and then HC here stands for hard credit. Hard credit is the money came from my bank account. SC would be soft credit, came from my employer for a matching gift, or there's other examples there. So here the filter group is all opportunities where the 1 is true and the amount is not equal to blank. So very straightforward. And then within the screen, you'll see rollups using this filter group. And you have all these different rollup filters that are pulling. This one's averaging it. This one's the best, the maximum amount for the last over time, the best gift year, the best gift year total. Each one of these rollups performs a different operation, but is still looking at a subset of records that fits these conditions. So that's the key structure of customizable rollups. Unlike a standard rollup where you kind of just choose the field, you choose the rollup summary, what's the calculation. Here it's split to allow the same, to reduce the amount of overhead. If you have the same set of records that you just need to pull different information from, customizable rollups makes that easy. So when I did this presentation back a few years ago, the key issue that a nonprofit ran into was a really critical aspect of engagement. So in accounting, you have cash versus accrual accounting. And, in one instance, if you get, let's say, $1,000 gift in 3 payments, or let's say 4 payments, the revenue is 1,000, but the cash, let's say you only have 250. So when you look at a donor profile or donor contact record, how do you know what the total amount is given? And this factors into how that nonprofit's going to engage that person. Are they going to send them an appeal, ask for more money? And if they've given, do you want that letter that they send to say, you haven't given this year, we're so looking for your help? And they might think to themselves, well, wait a minute, I just gave you $250 as a second installment on my pledge that I made last year. I've given to you already. But if you don't have that right data, you might send the wrong information. And because of this split, there was an issue with some clients where the opportunity reflected something different than the payments. And so the example here is how they previously handled roll-ups. So let's say someone's going to give a $1,500 gift at $500 a year. It's one donation record, one opportunity.
You got your grilled cheese right there.
Our grilled cheese is right here. You're absolutely right. Thank you. Yeah. So the use case here about why this feature, when it was introduced, was so helpful is that you had a donor who gave you $1,500. They gave you a check for $500 the first year, $500 the next year, $500 the next year. But the roll-ups were only working off of the opportunity stage. So you have either one option, you have 2 options. Mark the donation as open in process, so it doesn't tell you that you've received any money or I've received any revenue, or 2, you mark the donation closed. Neither one of those is accurate. And so here's how it plays out. So in almost, this is getting into the details here. Like if you have 3 installments, in option 1, you're marking as closed 1. The total gifts field in Salesforce with the rollup would say 1,500, and it would say the gifts year is 1,500. That's not accurate because they've only actually done, so I'm right here right now, they've only actually given you 500 for now. So this isn't accurate. The option 2 is leave the stage open, in which case their total gifts and gifts this year would be 0. That's also wrong. So then you get into year 2. Again, total gifts would be 1,500 if you did closed 1. Gifts this year is 0. Neither one of those is accurate. If it's open, 0, 0, also inaccurate. And then in the 3rd year, after they've paid all 1,500, the total gifts would be 1,500, but the total gifts this year field would be 0, which is inaccurate. And then it would be accurate. So you can kind of see very incrementally why the payment, not rolling up payment data, led to inaccurate information for the end user, right? So if I clear my, and so I'm not gonna, so that basically what ends up happening is you can't rely on those standard fields. So you would create a separate roll up to say total payments this year. And in fact, I've highlighted in the slides a recipe, total current year payments on prior year pledges. This is so nice to see when I looked at this. I was like, somebody created it. I want to show you what that looks like. Actually, can't hurt. I'm going to open that up. This is something called the Power of Us, which unless you're in the nonprofit space, you may not be familiar with. The Power of Us is a community of Salesforce nonprofit users. And this documentation is part of the NPSP product documentation. I'm in the customizable rollups. Again, I've linked to this in the slides. Here's the total current payments on prior year pledges. And there's some formulas that they're doing here and displaying the total amount of payments. But as I've highlighted here, it's operating off of that child object to give you that actual current, what money's coming in the door this year, not what revenue did we confirm from a previous field. And so, it's looking at payments. It gives you the description. It gives you this filter rule for your filter group. Then it tells you, what to do for the roll up. This is why I'm not doing this on the call today, folks, because it really is, I don't want to take time from great documentation. So I've linked that here. I'm going to speed up a little bit, and we're at 12:40 right now, my time. So that's kind of like the basic gist, right? That's what the customized roll-ups give you, a lot of flexibility. There's so many different use cases. The other areas other than payments were soft credits. Again, this is like how I influence stuff. At a high level, legacy roll-ups required a workaround. You needed flow, you needed declarative lookup rollup summary, which is an app, you needed rollup helper. Customizable rollups opened up the soft credit functionality, giving nonprofits a lot of capability to report on and roll up soft credit data, right? If your board member brought in $40,000, you want to be able to report on that easily with a roll-up field so that they can see that. An example, complex, more, it's not too complex, but it does get a little bit complex. So the use case here was, how do we see a board member's total giving hard credit, total giving soft credit using customizable rollups? It involved a checkbox on the opportunity object. It involved a new contact role value for board member soft credit, because the way the NPSP calculates hard credit, the money that you gave, and soft credit, the money that you influenced, actually comes off of different objects. One comes from the opportunity object, one comes from the contact role, opportunity contact role object. So to get that data, we have to come from the two separate objects. We created a field on the contact for board member, and ended up doing a manual data entry solution for the client, which worked out well because they only have 14 board members, not 4,000, right? And so the gift volume, the data volume was low enough. I do want to point out here, I put some notes at the bottom here. Board members have a tenure. Maybe it's January 1st to December 31st. Or maybe somebody leaves midterm. Let's say I'm on the board and I leave in June, and then I give $1,000. That doesn't count towards my board target because I'm no longer part of the board. And so that use case actually mattered because they had a few board members roll off, a few came on mid-year, and we attempted to scope out some automation to account for a start date and end date of their relationship with the affiliate, with the nonprofit. Ultimately, we chose to use this manual data entry route, checking a box on the hard credit, on the opportunity, creating a new soft credit contact role for those specific instances, because the automation that we're going to create to make sure everything was in line, it's like, well, what if I enter a close date that's within their term, and then I change it to a date after their term, and ultimately we would have had to account for like 8 different scenarios of data changes across 4 objects. In the NPSP, this was the opportunity, the affiliation object, the contact role object, and the partial soft credit object. So I'm not going to get too busy in here, but sometimes customizable rollups work best if you take a simple route depending on data volume. They were really happy with this though, because it gave the fundraising team a special component that pulled in only these fields only for board members. So they were able to very, very quickly look at board member reports and dashboards and fields that said, what's their total board giving, total gifts they gave, total soft credits. Not going to walk through this, but you can do some nifty things with the roll-ups where required. A quick call out to some technicals. So the roll-ups for the nonprofit success pack have been built to account for larger data volumes. And in the documentation, if you are curious about this, you can take a look at the different methods of calculation. Because once you get to over 250 opportunity records on a single account, you will start to hit CPU limits. And they built an architecture to account for that. Not a lot of nonprofits are gonna, I mean, it depends. I don't know what the distribution is. I would say that the number of nonprofits that have 250 opportunities connected to a single account is less than 25% of my experience. So for the most part, you're never going to have to worry about this. But if you do need to, they have a new feature set to allow for that. Nice thing they introduced about a year ago is the ability to take these batch jobs that are running for the nonprofit success pack and allow you to adjust them. My public service announcement on customizable roll-ups would be, if you are using them and you have things using declarative lookup roll-up summaries or roll-up helper, you will want to turn some of that off, because you will, if you have an integration that's affecting the opportunity object, the campaign object, campaign member, and you have customizable roll-ups and you have roll-up helper, you're going to increase the likelihood of errors. So just keep in mind for that. Some other ideas and use cases, I've linked those recipes. Donor streak, you can combine with reporting snapshots, which is a standard Salesforce feature to get some, I want to know what percentage of donors have a streak of greater than 3 years this year versus next year. You can do a lot of nice, fun things, and some other items there that account for some common or uncommon use cases. So I hope I provide a high level on the special nonprofit customizable roll-up feature. And I know it's a lot, but those slides will be available. So I'll stop right there. And if there are any questions, shoot.
I have a quick question. When you were mentioning based on, I think you were talking households, and you were saying based on the address, the people at that address. I assume if you're in a big, large, multi-complex facility, like a big high-rise apartment building, it'd be by the suites. Is that right?
Yes, right. Yes, I would. Yes. So you might have, you would have the address line to the street address would be different. So it would contain apartment, 14 or 27 or 27B. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That household issue comes into play when you have managing how the household composition changes too, splitting households and things like that. But good question.
What's a cost looks like on the turn on this feature? I'm not familiar with.
No cost.
So basically, it's a standard upgrade.
This is a standard upgrade, part of the NPSP kind of feature evolution. They do have a GitHub repository that's public, so you can see the releases as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is, NPSP is getting, back in 2011, it was like a ragtag group of 4 people trying to push new changes. And over time, it's really evolved and matured.
Is this official supported by Salesforce?
Yes.
Cool.
And that's because previously used to be salesforce.org, right? Which offered the NPSP, and salesforce.com bought .org. And so they've rolled that support in. If you do submit a case, for example, they will give you nonprofit as a separate type. It does kind of steer it towards that division, but it's now a vertical, health cloud, Health Cloud, Commerce Cloud, Nonprofit Cloud.
Yeah, I remember like they announced to roll in the nonprofit into Salesforce last year, right? So what is there any like a big change like from nonprofit perspective, like after they roll in the product?
For most end users, it wasn't a big change. It changed some of the community projects that were being worked on. It also changed the offering. So for example, Salesforce via the nonprofit offers a new feature that is paid for like payment processing. Previously, you had to go to a third party for that. That payment processing engine is not an inexpensive feature, and I don't believe would have been offered had .org not been purchased by the .com side and given access to those resources. So in other words, the way they saw it was for the nonprofit success pack to compete at larger scale with larger nonprofits as well as smaller nonprofits. They brought them into the fold, and they are able to offer the free non-PSP. Like any nonprofit can get the NPSP free. Customizable rollups, one of many features that are included, but now there's like an upper tier of products that weren't there previously that do cost money.
Great. Any other question for Ryan on the live?
Ryan, I was curious if you have clients or nonprofits that take in donations on the web, they're using a payment portal. Are there any examples where that integrates, where payments go in, make a record, and then the roll-ups are there to summarize and provide those reports?
Definitely, yeah. There's probably no less than 10 I could rattle off. You can even do it with form assembly or form stack and just go ahead and create the opportunity record. The roll-ups will reference the standard amount field on the opportunity. So however that record gets into Salesforce, it will calculate it. But yeah, so there's a lot down that road in terms of the key thing to note with this is the nonprofit use case for revenue from donations with the NPSP is going to hit other things aside from the opportunity object. So if you're looking at it for a client or somebody you're working with to say, okay, do you want this integration? Is it going to create the records that you want? It might create the opportunity, but it might not create the contact role effectively, which is a key part of soft credits or other reporting. Think of like peer-to-peer. That's a really big part for a lot of nonprofits. Some integrations don't touch the opportunity contact role object. You might have the fund category in NPSP. This is called the general accounting unit. Most integrations that don't handle this, and those that do handle it okay, but that's going to be like which goes to restricted and these funds and programs, and which goes to unrestricted. So that's another element. How it handles payments. Recurring giving is a big one, and recurring giving with designations and is like if someone says, I'm going to give you $100 a month and I want it to unrestricted, but then I want to change mid-year to like another fund or something. That integration needs to play well with that. Or in most cases, we're seeing that that's like the gold standard. And so you'll have some manual data entry for some of that. So there's, depending on their uses, like, yes, there's definitely integrations. There's Soapbox Engage, there's Classy, there's Form Stack, you can integrate there. There's a ton.
Yeah, we had in a previous role, we had NPSP. We had a bunch of data imported. We were using the roll-ups, but this was maybe 2006 or 7, and we couldn't get it to integrate with any automated payment processing. So we actually went with a third party and set up CauseView, which installed their package. What we learned last minute was that CauseView can't operate when NPSP exists. So they had to uninstall NPSP, and it was a mess because they basically modeled their own system after the NPSP rollup system and expanded off of it. So I was curious how far Salesforce has now come to actually just support all those other areas.
They've come pretty far. And in fact, what you're hitting on is the paid product that I was referencing. Some of the paid products, one of them is called Elevate, and you can go search this up. It's a paid product, but it's Salesforce had so many third-party providers like CauseView and others who are trying to keep pace with the NPSP's data model changes. And in some instances, Salesforce was seeing that was an unmet need in the space.
Yeah.
And they created their own product to meet that need.
I've never seen so many deprecated fields in my life.
I want to say bless you, man. That's a world, but good for you. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Any more questions? Take for a no. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Good timing. And I know you have to go, a hard stop. So thank you very much for your time today. And we learned a bunch here.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, thank you for you reached out to me. Happy to share.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening, and I'll make sure to send you the slides.
Yeah.
In email. And if
Okay.
my email's on those slides, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I will share this with everyone. Thank you.
Everybody.
Yeah, have a good day. Okay, now we are handing this over to Mike. So as I introduced earlier, Mike is the leader in the Syracuse, New York developer group, and so he will talk about the SFDX for admin. So it's all yours, Mike.
Okay, so this is going to be kind of an interactive demo. We're going to be jumping in and out of presentation mode throughout the entire thing. So first, just a quick note about who I am. I am a Salesforce developer. I hold 11 certifications. Been on the platform for, I think, about 6 years now, give or take. I started off as a QA engineer. I actually got into using Salesforce DX as a QA engineer. And then as I transitioned into developer role, DX did greatly expand, its usefulness to me. But I found a lot of what I've done before and a lot of the non-developer stuff that I do still actually is very relevant to the SFDX environment. And so while this does cater towards admins, admittedly, if you are a developer, either declarative or programmatic developer, a lot of this stuff probably will apply to your day-to-day job as well. So first, why do I even use SFDX? So here's a couple of things, and we are going to do all of these today in the next 40 minutes or so. We're going to log into a bunch of different places. We're going to move metadata from here to there to there. We're going to play around with automating the creation of metadata. So you don't have to go through setup and click next, 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 and setup when you try to create new objects. We're going to do some SQL stuff, a little bit of queries, and we're going to make some reports that normally would have required coding to actually write the reports. We're going to do reports that Salesforce does not allow us to do. The first thing we have to do is we have to get over this hurdle of the command line. A lot of people in the admin community, I find, get very scared of the command line. They're very intimidated by it. And I know a bunch of developers, especially the more up and coming ones who are used to fully integrated IDEs and stuff like that. Even developers are not as familiar with the command line as people used to be. And really, there's not a whole lot of difference between what you're doing in the command line and what you're doing in a browser. Here's an example right here. I have a permission set group. I have a permission set, and I'm assigning a user in the user interface. And on the command line, it looks funky, but it's easy to get through. We'll get through this. But I'm saying take this permission set, this one called Ursus Park user, and assign it to this username. So you're still doing the same actions. It just looks a little different. And this presentation will be available afterwards. All the metadata we're going to be looking at through this is going to be available as well. I'll post a link to this in the chat room, and this will be available immediately for you to go and play with this stuff. I also included a couple of links to some command line guides, a little bit of hints out there of how to use a basic command line, some of the basic commands. The big thing to keep in mind is that command line is just text. That's it. You're just typing some text, and that's all you need to do. And it has been the domain of the system administrator for decades. At system admins, and Salesforce admins or admins, you are a system administrator. This is stuff that sysadmins have been doing for a long time. Don't say you're not technical enough to use the command line. I don't want to ever hear those words come out of anyone's mouth ever. That is bullshit. If you can deal with flows in Salesforce, you can deal with the command line. In the presentation here, I have a couple of these are kind of like the major command line arguments that you would use to migrate your system, to move between directories and manipulate the file system. Feel free to play with it, as you go. Mac users, Windows users are going to look a little different. Linux users, if you use Linux, it's going to look like the Mac system. But generally speaking, it's pretty much relatively similar. The first step you're going to have to do is you're going to have to install the SFDX CLI. Here's a link to it. It is an executable file, so you do have to download and go through an installer. It's a very simple installer, but just in case in some people's environments are really locked down, you might have to, if you're doing this on a corporate machine, you might have to ask your security department to give you administrator rights to install it. I think it requires admin rights on Windows, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And there is a trail. There is a simple little trail for getting started in SFDX, just kind of getting you up and running with it. It's not the greatest thing last time I checked, but good enough. Once you do have it installed, the first thing you do, it's going to basically do nothing for you. The first thing you got to do is you got to actually have it connect to your Salesforce systems. And it will work with your production or your sandboxes or your Trailhead playgrounds. And it's actually very handy for the Trailhead playgrounds because then you don't have to log into Trailhead and figure out which of those playgrounds is which. If you have developer editions, you could use it with developer editions. If you don't have production access, it's not a big deal. You could just log in with your regular into any of your sandboxes. It works through single sign-on. So if your org has single sign-on enabled, it's just fine. I can handle that. I can still log in. It redirects you to your single sign-on domain. You log in there, it gets the clearance, and everything goes, and you don't have to worry about it again. And to some of those Trailhead ones will get you kind of up and going with this, how to actually connect in. The big thing to keep in mind, though, is if you're logging into a sandbox, you have to use this -R and then put, test.salesforce.com so that it knows you're going to a sandbox. Otherwise, it assumes you're logging into production. And then, if you try to use production credentials in a sandbox, it doesn't work. So relatively simple stuff. And then when you have it, and I'm going to zoom in my screen here. SFDX is the name of the command line program. And then you say, what do you want to do with it? Force org list. And so now what it's doing is going through all of the domains that all of the Salesforce instances that I have associated, and I could open any one of these that I wish. So you can see I got a whole bunch of them. If you refresh a sandbox, you have to log back in again. It is using it stores a token on your laptop or your desktop tied to this machine so that you could log in without having to type your username and password, so you can get right into the machine, but it's not saving your username and passwords in plain text. So I know some people, they will copy and paste a URL that has their command line in it, their password in it, and paste that into a web browser to kind of get around having to log in. It doesn't do that. It uses secure tokens so that you don't have to have that security issue where you have your password out there in plain text. In terms of my job, I have my company has 3 different organizations. And in each of those orgs, we have a whole bunch of sandboxes and dev sandboxes and full copies. So this is what I see at work. These are the organizations that I use in my job. And you can see there's tons of them. And look at all these different usernames. Now I took off the little bits on the end here. You know, it's not my real name, but there's a whole bunch of text over there, and the org IDs are changed. So don't try to log in as me later on. But you know, it's like, well, EB pre, EB UAT, EB, all of these would be way too complex to remember. What's my username for password for this? What's the address? What's that? So all I have to do is say, open EB dev, I'm in my developer environment. Open int, I'm in the integration environment. Open pre, I'm in pre-prod. I don't have to memorize what's where or what. And these aliases are whatever I want them to be. You know, it doesn't have to be my username. So if I don't like, you know, being whatever it's called, I could just change it. You know, and I could have it say whatever I want. You see this one on here, RE old dev. No username's gonna have RE old dev because that's one I was using in the past. I could change these, update them, customize it to whatever I need. So now let's start doing stuff. Let's actually start moving around metadata. So I have a command. So the first command here. In fact, I'm going to open the org so you could see what I am looking at. So I have one of my orgs. This is a Trailhead Playground. And you can see all I did was type force org open and which org I want to open up. And it opened right into it. Didn't have to log in or anything. And I'm right in here. And I have created a package. Now in Trailhead Playgrounds, you don't have change sets. You can't do it in Trailhead Playgrounds. They don't give you change sets, unfortunately. But in your dev environments, you would. So you would just go into your, you know, change set, just as you normally would. And I created one over here. I call it ham. It's lunchtime. I'm thinking about the one of the 3 Canadian foods I know of, ham. And so I added stuff here. I have an Apex class. I have a test Apex class. And I have 2 custom fields. One of them's a date field, one of them's a checkbox. And I threw it in. And normally at work in my day-to-day job, I'd be putting this into a change set. This is for the people who are not using Scratch orgs. I'm talking to you traditional, you know, dev sandbox people out there. And hopefully admins, I hope you're using dev sandboxes and not making changes in production. Different rant, different argument there. And so the command I ran, sfdx force, you'll see this force everywhere, MD API, so the metadata API, retrieve. And guess what it does? It retrieves metadata from somewhere. The -R is where do I want to put it? I put the dot to say I want to put it right in the directory I'm in. The -U is where do I want to get it from? I want to get it from one of my aliases that I called unit. And the -P is package. What package do I want? So this is the name of the package. In traditional environments, you'd put your change set name in here. And I'm going to go onto my desktop and I'm going to run it right from there. And then you'll see on my desktop, as soon as it downloads, it takes a few seconds, I now have a zip file is created right here. I'm going to open that file. And this is the metadata. So when you're using change sets and when you're pushing data from your sandbox to prod, this is what Salesforce is doing in the back end. This is really what it's pushing. It's pushing these files from one place to another. And what are these files? I'm going to open it up. It's a text file. Technically, it's XML formatted, but it's a text file. And if you know basic HTML, these are really easy to read. Apex class, there's my two classes. Custom field, account, there's my name, account, there's the other custom field I'm creating. Let's go into objects here. I have objects. These are my custom objects. So in between this fields here, this is one of them. Get the field name, the default value, a description field, the text field, the labels. What type of field is it? It's a checkbox. Down here, the type, it's a date field. There's the name. There's my description. There's my inline help text, that little eye icon that shows up on the screen. There's the label displayed to the user. And so the way the metadata works is you get this package file, and the package file says, this is the stuff I want to deploy. And then in all of these folders here is the what actually is being deployed. So this is, this is a package that has code, test classes. I'm going to open up, there's one of my classes right there. So this has code, which means that it has to have unit tests. So we're going to try doing a test deploy into a completely unrelated org. So I now have a second environment here. This is W21. This is a separate Trailhead playground, completely separate, a completely different org entirely in Salesforce parlance. SFDX, force, MD-API, deploy, which you can probably guess what that does. Where do I want to deploy it? I want to deploy it to my W21 org. -F for file. Oh, and you're probably wondering, all right, well, how am I going to memorize all these things? These are really a lot of commands. Well, guess what? SFDX, help, force, MD-API, deploy. There's all your instructions. There's all your flags right there. -F, zip file, -OL, test file. All the instructions is right there. If you have no idea what to do, you just do SFDX space help, and then you start typing the stuff in. If you're not even sure, if you don't remember deploy, we'll do help, force, MD-API, and it'll tell you these are the different things you could do. Convert, deploy, retrieve. And so the help guide is built into this completely. It's built directly into the command line. You don't have to go out to the web to find all this stuff. So you don't have to memorize all these flags and be like, oh, I'm never going to memorize that. You don't have to. The -W for wait. So I'm going to deploy this. And instead of being a deploy, fire it off and walk away, I want to just sit here and wait for this to finish. So I'm going to say 2. 2 what? 2 minutes. So I'm going to sit here and it's going to try to deploy, and it's going to wait for 2 minutes for it to finish deploying. This is a small little package. It won't take 2 minutes. And then -C. I don't want to actually deploy it yet. We want to prove some stuff out. This is basically, in when you do change sets, you hit that validate button. That's what this is effectively doing. It's validating the deployment to say, will this work? And so now it's going and it's attempting to deploy. And it says validated. I blew up the screen here, so it's kind of hard to see the words there, but it actually does have, it does say deployed under there. But before I deploy, remember how I said I had Apex code? And do your developers do 100% code coverage? We don't always. So before we deploy this, why don't we also see how much code coverage is covered there? And so I added something else here, -L for run specified tests. I want to run certain unit tests. And the -R is which test I want to run. I'm going to run the ones in this package itself. And this is something I do get into the habit of doing as a developer before I check my code in, because we use CI/CD processes, but I will occasionally, if I have something big, I will run my unit tests like this before I even check it into Git, just to make sure that everything probably will work and it saves me from having to do an extra commit into Git. And you could see here it's saying, here's my classes, here's my stuff, it all passed. And you can see the number of lines covered. So you can see here, I have 100% test coverage. So I know this will be okay to send to production. Not only there's a pass, I got over that 75% threshold. Let's prove it even more. I'm going to go into my test class here. And I'm gonna get rid of some test cases. So now I just wrote really crappy unit tests, effectively. I've underdone my unit tests. So now let's run that again. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, I am one directory too high. There we go. This time I added, instead of -F, I have a -D for directory. So I could actually deploy this directory instead of having to zip this stuff all up. And you'll also notice I can manipulate this metadata outside of Salesforce. I don't have to be in Salesforce to do any of this stuff. And you can see here, I have crappy unit test coverage. I have uncovered lines. I'm over that 75, but just barely. So now you know, when you get one of these, you can go back to your developers and say, hey, this is barely good enough. Do it again. You know, make your unit test better. Keep us honest. You know, keep us developers honest on these things. And you could also, if you wanted to, I'm going to go in this account object here, and you know what? I'm going to say this date field. There's a line here that says required. If you can see it, it says required false. I'm going to make that say true. I changed my mind. I want to make that a required field. And now let's actually deploy that code. So I'm going to take off that -C for check, and we're going to actually try to deploy this. And now let me open up force org open -uw21. Now let's go into our object manager and look at accounts. Look at the fields. And there they are. They are now in my org. And I'm going to go into this realized one. And you can see here it's checked off for required. So I was able to manipulate this data, make changes outside of Salesforce very simply, these small little changes very easily without having to go in, rebuilding a change set, deploying all the change set, doing all that stuff. I can do it right from here. So that got me to start thinking, well, if I can do that, and if I can manipulate this stuff, could we do something wild and crazy? Could we create 500 fields and deploy 500 fields using these simple text files? And so I presented that as a challenge to some administrators out there. I said, how long do you think it would take you to create and deploy 500 fields to production using change sets? And one administrator said it would take them about 3 days to create all those fields and another 2 days of bashing their heads trying to build the stupid change set because of how you have to click and go and it's such a pain. We can do this in under 10 minutes. We create all these fields. Now I'm not going to spend 9 minutes manipulating a spreadsheets and stuff like that here, but I did record and I've posted the video online in that in the place where you get the slides of how we actually did it. And all I did was say, okay, I want to have 500 fields that all have the same name. So I created one field. I extract the one field, I put it on a page layout, build a package, extract it all. And then took this field that I wanted to create,
Like, can I interrupt
Yeah,
for a sec? So
sure.
did you create the unmanaged or managed package?
Unmanaged.
Thank you.
I mean, you could create managed packages if you want, but no need, you know. And if I was doing this in my you know, in my for work, I'd be using change sets. I'd just be creating a change set. But took it, put it into Excel, used a couple of Excel formulas to build up a big long list of things, and using Excel formulas filled in the missing data. So if you have a list of fields and they're all the same type, like someone says, I need 20 fields, all text fields, you can just create one of these things, throw it in Excel, use Excel formulas to build all this up. Feel free to go through the video. It's kind of fun. And also notice I haven't wrote in a single line of code yet. Okay, this is all just text files and Excel. And so you build up, and ends up what happens is you have this, you basically create this really, really big text file. Big file that has 500 fields in it. And if I go into the object, there's all my 500 fields. They're all very similar. X2, X3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down to 500. Very large. Page layouts, same thing. I threw it all on page layouts as well. And is this very practical? Is anyone going to do this in their day-to-day life? Probably not, but it's, hey, it's something you can do. And it's just some, you know, a fun little thing that maybe this, you know, maybe this is a big deal to some people. Maybe you do have to create a whole lot of stuff. Well, let the computer deal with it. You know, automate this stuff. So I'm going to switch into my test directory. And now it is going to deploy it. And you can see here the same commands. And all I did was create one field and one page layout in Salesforce, and all the others of these have been plopped in here. And as I said, with no code, 500 fields in under 10 minutes. This is almost done. And now it is finished. I'm going to reload my object manager, and there it is. There's my object. There's my 500 fields. If you want to see on the page, that's what it looks like on the page. And keep in mind, you could also include your profiles for field level security. So if you're creating fields and you don't want to have to keep on manipulating things, I've done on occasions where I've added my fields to one profile when I created my dev sandbox, and then using SFDX, add those permissions or field level security stuff to whatever profiles I wanted to later on. So if I have like 20 profiles in my org and I added a field to like 19 of them, and then it's like, oh, we need to add this to this one extra profile. Okay. Using FDX, I just basically do a copy, add an extra profile in there, whatever name I wanted to, and I don't have to go into set up and manipulate all these fields to add them, especially if you have a lot of fields. So let's get a little more practical for a day-to-day life of an admin. SOQL queries. These are great little fast queries that you can do. If you know SOQL, you can do SOQL on the command line. So I'm going to start with the first one here. I'm going to get a list of all the names and states from accounts. And there we go. Force data SOQL query -u, which org do I want to get it from? -q, what am I querying? What's my SOQL query? Select ID, name, billing state from account. And I get a nice little list. That's nice. What if I want it as a CSV file? Okay, there's a CSV. What if I want to save that and let's say import it, you know? So let me go back to my desktop. This little caret thing basically says take this output and write it to a file. Billing states.csv. It does the query. And on my desktop, I have a new file called billing states.csv, and there it is. So I exported the CSV right out of Salesforce and right here. By the way, you could also use this to import data as well. So if you don't like using data loader, you can use SFDX instead to extract data out from one org and import it into another org. Let's go a little deeper. There are sometimes you have a lot of fields. The account object alone has what, like 50 or 60 standard fields, give or take. Some of them aren't even on page layouts. What if you just want to see everything? Here's an example. This one here. I have one account in Singapore. It's the only account I have that's not in the United States. I found that a little odd. So that means I wanted to look a little deeper into it. Force data record get -u from where? -s, what am I getting? I'm getting an account. -i, which one? This account by ID. And it's giving me the data for this account, every single field that I have access to using on field level security. And I'm an admin, so I have access to everything. I'm getting everything, regardless of whether it's on the page layout or not. This would be a giant pain in the ass to build a report on. Even with the new features where you could drag and drop the stuff, it's still a pain in the neck, and not every field is actually reportable. Let's say I want to analyze this a little bit nicer. I could, I could export it out to a text file. And now I have it as a text file, so I could look at it later. I could email this to someone. Very simple way to get all the data out. I can see which ones are nulls, which ones are just blanks. Very easy way to do effectively a data dump. So we can get data out. We could write it to files. We can query for stuff. We have computers. Computers can do batch files. Computers can run multiple commands at once. Computers can take outputs from one thing and pipe it into something else. So why don't we go a little bit further? Here is something you cannot do in Salesforce: lead and contact reports. Do you want to have a report that lists all your leads and all your contacts in the same report? Salesforce will not let you do this at all. And they say very explicitly right here, they will not let you do that, and we will never do that. And now smaller organizations, this might not be a big deal. If you only have like 100 leads and 200 contacts, who cares? You're not going to have performance issues. And so we say, screw you to Salesforce. We're going to generate that report using SFDX. So all I have here is 2 commands. And you could see I put a semicolon between them. First command, force data SQL query, select name from lead, and then run force data SQL query, select name from contact. And so it's going to query for the leads and then query for the contacts. And you get the data down. And there's my leads, there's my contacts. And keep in mind, I'm doing this in Trailhead Playgrounds. The Trailhead Playgrounds all have the same bits of sample data. So when you run this report, you're going to see these same names. Now, this is a bit ugly. This is still not the greatest thing in the world. I think we could improve this because we can't hand this to a salesperson and be like, here's your list of business, here, go. So we can use additional text manipulation stuff built in to software. Now, things like this, tail. Tail is something that's common in Unix. It's common on Mac systems, and you can get this on Windows. Sometimes I think it's called Unix utilities. There's open source software out there that does this sort of stuff. Tail, sort, and unique. Tail basically says, give me the last parts of a file, throw off the stuff on the top, so we're going to throw off the header rows. Sort, what sort do? It sorts. What does unique do? It gives you unique list. It removes duplicates to give you unique listing. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to query for the names. The pipe says take the output from this command and put it into another command. So I'm going to take the list of names from leads. I'm going to throw off those header rows. The header row says, name at the top. This line, you see these two lines here? We're going to get rid of them using this tail command. We're going to say, give me everything but these first two rows. And we're going to take all of this stuff that comes out of it, and we're going to sort it. And then we're going to pipe it through unique to get rid of duplicates, because if someone's listed as a lead and they're listed as a contact, we can get rid of those and make it one big name, one list. And so that's a little bit better. Now we got all my leads and all my contacts, and it's all sorted nicely. And you know what you could do with that? Instead, let's go a little deeper, because once again, this is not the most useful thing for, let's say, a salesperson. Let's also get their companies, their account names, the phone numbers, take all that stuff, and then we're going to save it into a CSV file. Run the queries. Here's my CSV. And now this is something I could actually give to a salesperson. Say, here you go. Here's all your leads. Here's all your contacts. Here's the accounts they're associated with. Here's their phone numbers. Leave me alone. Here's your report. Go away. And finally, one more thing is you can use this with loops. And so you can create batch files or scripts to do these reports as well. So I've included in the code you guys have, I gave a little file. Which one is it? SFTX for admins, demo files. I created this this very simple shell script. And shell scripts are, they're a little more advanced, I will admit. Okay, but once again, shell scripts are the domain of a system administrator. This is not something for developers. Developers can use this. I recommend developers do use it, but this is still admin level functionality. And what I do here in this thing is I say, okay, give me, I'm outputting a header row. And then what I'm doing is I'm saying, give me all of the billing states from the account object. So I go through the accounts and pull out all the states. I'm going to take that, I'm going to sort it, and I'm going to make a unique list. And so now I'm going to take that report and say, okay, these are all the states that we have accounts in. And then we're going to loop through every one of those and say, find me leads where we have business in that state. Maybe someone knows someone from there. So who, what states are we in? Who are all the leads in those states? I want to focus on those. Maybe you want to even do the opposite and say, give me all the states that don't exist, where we don't do business in. But for now, we're just going to go through, and what's it's going to do is it's going to query through each one of those states and say, okay, give me the leads for each state. So let me go over to that. So here's where it's querying for the states and saying, I give me all the states. And then each one of these is it's querying for each state. So remember before when we saw it, there we had business in say, you know, Nevada, New York, California. It's going through and it's querying and looping doing this. It does take some time, I will admit, but this is a great way to be able to do reports. Once again, that you cannot do this through the reporting engine. There is no way to get to find out who where your leads are in relation to your account. You can't do that at all. And so in the end, I got this report here, and these are all my leads in states where I do business, at least in the Trailhead Playground sense. And once again, Salesforce doesn't let you do this easily. You would have to go to a developer to ask him to write custom SOQL queries and make loops and stuff like that. And as a developer, I don't want to spend my time writing code when I could just write a simple shell script and be done with it. And so all of this stuff, and I know there's a whole bunch of stuff, and this is more about possibilities than anything else, because really SFDX opens up a lot of possibilities for you. It's really what it is. And so you're going to find, as you know, depending on your use needs, the more you use DX and the more you explore it, you'll find more and more, these are interesting things that I could do. Maybe you might even want to just do queries saying, is this field even populated? So you just do a select count where field is not blank, and you can get a very quick answer. Do I have any data in a particular field if you want to get rid of a field? And so at this point, I'll open it up to general questions.
Hey, Mike, this is Kevin. Thanks. That was actually unbelievably. I didn't know you could do any of this stuff. So.
Isn't it? And no one knows. Yeah, that's the weird thing. No one knows. And this is all admin stuff.
Yeah, this is really eye-opening for me. Yeah.
So anyways, on the questions side, so the material that you're going to provide us, obviously we got this recording, but what else, can you sort of describe what else material we're going to get? So
yeah,
that we
sure.
can
Let me
look into this.
Yeah, let me reshare and let me go to the link. So I'm going to show you what you have here. You have this recording. You have, and this is what, if you go to that link, this is what you see. These are all the files. If you want to watch those movies of creating and deploying the 500 fields, feel free. It's silly. You get that batch file that I did at the end. You're getting the package we did in the beginning where I was moving metadata out and putting it somewhere else. That's the package right there. And you're getting in big test package here. This is the 500 files, the 500 fields. This is the package that it gets. So if you download this thing or the zip file of it, you could deploy the 500 fields off with that. I've also included some of the outputs that I've had in this. So anytime I export to a CSV file, like contacts and leads or customer states, I have it here so you can compare your results to what happened in the demonstration.
Okay, I got one other question. I probably have a lot more, but so when you said SFDX, when I had seen that subject, I was thinking of the thing that Salesforce does on the DX, not the community, but their marketing, what do you call it? So is SFDX a package, or what exactly is it?
So the branding on this really sucks. The idea is SFDX is supposed to theoretically be the Salesforce developer experience, which is more like an overarching term as opposed to a specific technology, or more like a kind of a collection of technologies to a certain degree. The stuff we looked at here was the SFDX CLI, or command line interface. And it's just one piece of the developer experience.
And is there any trailheads on this site?
There is. I have a link to it. They have some trails on it.
Okay.
The trails aren't that great. Last I looked, I haven't looked in a while, but they didn't go into details like this, where it's like you could do these, you could easily move the metadata between unrelated orgs, and you could do these reports. That's the sort of stuff where they really are downplaying the power of this tool.
Okay, I'm going to shut up and let other people ask questions, but thank
No,
you.
no,
That was
feel free.
awesome.
Hi, Mike. Actually, this is Fred. I just had a question.
Mhm.
So can you do a search for, let's say if you're trying to find an instance of some term in metadata somewhere, some reference to the API name of the field or something like that. Can
Oh,
you use CLI to do that?
I know where you're going with that, and yes, you can. And this is, by the way, this is okay. So my Scrum Master is actually on this call now, but don't tell her how easy this is, because developers will keep coming to me and being like, "Are we using these fields anywhere?"
Right.
Yeah, watch. I'm gonna go into here. I'm going to go to my big test package here. Let's say I want to look for where is the field. All right, this x3_c, that's a field. So I want to see where is that being used. And if you are using source control systems, you could do this right at the root level of your source control system. grep -i for case insensitive, because I don't care if someone capitalized this or lowercase this or whatever. And I want to -r for recursive. I want to go down to my entire directory tree. I want to look in everything. It's on this page layout. It's in this object file, and it's in my package XML.
Huh.
So, okay, big deal. Well, guess what? If you download your reports metadata, you can see where is this field referenced in all of your public reports. So public reports are a little tricky to deal with because, you know, a lot of times people do stuff in prod, and there's stuff out there where you could actually download the reports metadata using VS Code to grab all that stuff. And you can use this not only to reference your code, but you can use it to search email templates. You could search all your public reports. You could do a whole bunch of that stuff to find out where something is used, and it works better than the Salesforce's built-in "where is this used" tab. It will even find where, like, if it's in comments, or maybe if it's in, let's say, a string somewhere in your code as opposed to being directly referenced, it will find those as well. So you could find things that Salesforce doesn't even know it exists.
Do you need to be in the, because you're in a directory there, so you have to start out. So where are you to start?
It depends. So like if you have your metadata, right? It depends on where you are in this. So like here I am on admins for SFDX demo files big test package, and you can see here admins for SFDX demo files big test package. And so I'm saying from this place where I am right now, search everything in here.
Got it.
For that data. If I wanted to just look on page layouts, okay, it'll just give me page layouts.
Hey, Mike,
just an object.
just to clarify,
Sure.
In order to get these results, you need to download all metadata to your folders, and then you can do grep.
Yes, you would need to download all your metadata, which the instructions of how to do that, it's out there. At some point, I might actually make my own video on that, because I don't like a lot of the actual information out there on these things. If you are using CI/CD and you have, let's say, a Git repository, you would just pull down your Git repository and look through it that way. And if you're an admin, ask for read access to the Git repository, and have the developer find a developer, make friends with them, and ask them to spend 10 minutes just getting you up and running and showing you how to download the data. Even if you're never going to check code in, which you really should. If you're an admin and using CI/CD, you should learn how to use Git. It's also not too bad. But you can use it. You can use that. You could use your source control system to actually parse through all this stuff. I do it a lot when I'm looking for references in code. So I would pull down my Git data and do this grep on the entire code base to say, where is this thing being used in my entire code base? And I find it to be a lot faster and easier to do it that way than many of the other tools that are out there. And it's all free. That's the other nice thing is I'm not paying for any of this stuff. I don't pay for any IDEs. I don't have to pay for Elements Cloud or Compatico or any of those stuff. You know, it's just like it's all here and it's all available to you literally for free today.
So quick question here. Like when you search the field, right?
Mhm.
Do you need to like specify which object it come from?
So it depends. Not necessarily. So like layouts, like page
Mhm.
layouts don't know which object it really is, right? So I'm not specifying it here.
Mhm.
Now page layouts, the file name is going to have the object name in it. So you see like big testers, you know, so it knows there. So it kind of knows. So I could, if I really wanted to, you know, say, all right, just search inside any of these, you know, things called big tests.
Mhm.
But it is nice that you can have it search across everything regardless of object.
Yeah.
And sometimes dealing with objects is a little tricky if you have the same API name on two different objects.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sometimes the output, there may be something common that you could filter out from the output and say, discard all the stuff that isn't part of this, or show me the stuff that is part of this. So
Yeah.
sometimes I will take this output and take this grep output and pipe it through another grep, either pulling in or pulling out whatever fields I wanted to look for.
Cool. Yeah, this is really eye-opening for me, like for what we can do with this. Like I have a million questions, but I'm not going to ask today. I'm
Oh
going
yeah, sure. And
yeah,
yeah, feel free to message me, you know, if you have anything.
I'm definitely going to revisit this presentation and you know,
Great.
just get hands-on myself. Like
Yeah, that's really the best thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely will save so much time. I can say from day-to-day reporting stuff, like, you know, that is really genius. Yeah.
Just the ability to log in by just typing force.org open production.
Mhm.
And I'm in production and I don't have to do anything. That is my time saver.
It's a magic. It's a magic.
It's so
Yeah.
easy. And I said, even as a QA engineer, where I only had 2 orgs to log into,
Mhm.
it was worth it just for that.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. Yeah.
And Mike, what's your opinion on Visual Studio Code in combining with this to give admins UI that they're more comfortable with it instead of command line?
I have VS Code. I've used it every so often. I'm still not overly comfortable in it. I find it okay. You know, it's just okay for me. I think I don't see any reason to deny an admin access to VS Code. I don't think an admin will necessarily spend their entire life in VS Code, but it is handy to have, and there are some things you can do there. So you know, it's okay. It's okay as a thing, and it's a free tool, which is nice. It works better than trying to do this with like text edit. You know, depending on what you're trying to do. A lot of the times I will hop into the command line instead of the VS Code because I usually want to use these text manipulation things. So I want to take the output and pipe it through grep and pipe it through sort and do it through and, you know, run a unique on it. And doing that sort of stuff I find easier just to do on a command line. But I've been a Unix user for like 20 years at this point, give or take. So I'm kind of comfortable with a lot of those command line tools, just from, you know, standard Linux usage. But I use a combination of everything. I will do stuff in the dev console as well, you know.
And when we are on this dev console, Salesforce promised that they will create Visual Studio Code in cloud and give us another console for new development. What did you have a chance to see some of those? Or?
I've only seen a little bit of it, and then they said they were going to charge people for it, and I became very not interested in it at that point.
Oh,
because my company's not going to pay for it, you know. So it is interesting. It is an interesting concept. What they do with it, who knows? The dev console is okay, but it is limping along. Admittedly, it does have its, you know, I mean, the dev console sucks, and everyone knows it. So I am kind of excited for VS Code to the cloud, but I'm also not excited that anyone's going to pay for it. And so my company's attitude is if we got it for free, we're not paying for it.
Yeah, we just need to tell them that nobody will use it if it's paid too, and they will give us for free one day.
Yeah, protest it.
It happened in the past, you know, people were complaining, nobody was using it, and they were giving it out because they have it.
Yeah, I have a feeling that eventually they might just do that. Yeah, where they just say, okay, this part's free, and the things like the virtual machines and the like built-in CI/CD stuff, that will probably become a paid-for add-on. It's like, all right, whatever, no one's going to care about that anyways.
Yeah, it was a great presentation, Mike. Thank
Thank
you.
Yeah, this is really awesome. Yeah. Any other questions for Mike? I know probably a lot of you seem like me, have a lot of questions.
Mhm.
But I really like appreciate
Sure.
your time to speak this to us, and I personally really interested about this topic, and definitely will get my hands on to learn more about this in the future. And yeah, I think we are good on timing, and so thank you, Mike, again, and for this presentation. Just a quickly reminder for everyone, we have another meeting scheduled in March 26th. So the topic are listed here. So the time is like March 26th in the noon as well. So we will send out the invite later on to everybody. So I think that's a wrap. And so thank you everybody for joining today. And we will share the recording and the presentation slides in our community group. And